chores and sweep till the floor's all clean. Polish and wax, do laundry and mop and shine up. Sweep again, and by then it's like 7:15.
Percents are everywhere in our world. We use them to compare. We use them to evaluate, such as on your tests. So let's break down what the word percent really means by breaking it up into its prefix and suffix. Its prefix is per, P-E-R, not like a kitty. But this per means for every or for each. And you heard this when we dealt with rates. Miles per hour, miles per gallon, heartbeats per minute, and that meant for every or for each. The suffix of the word percent is cent. So what does cent mean? Cent literally means 100. So when you put that together, you get the word percent. So now using its prefix and its suffix, what does the word percent mean? Percent means for every 100. Or you can look at it as meaning out of 100. So let's also write that down. Or out of 100. And the phrase out of in math refers to the operation that is this, division. So now let's put it together a little bit more and look at the symbol which goes with percent. I know you've seen that before, and I'm going to use an example with this. So if I have this, 30%, that's how I would read it. That literally means 30 out of 100, or you could read this as 30%. 30 going with the 30, per going with the fraction bar, and cent going with the 100.
All right, so we are going to head down to the second chunk in our notes, and it is titled Converting Rational Numbers Power Triangle. We are going to use a power triangle to help us convert between the three different forms of rational numbers that are fraction, decimals, and percents. Now, we did part of this back in Unit 2. We converted fractions to decimals, decimals to equivalent fractions. But now we're adding in percents. So we want to be able to go from a fraction to a percent to a fraction. We want to be able to go from a decimal to a percent to a decimal. And this power triangle is going to be one resource just to help us or remind us on how to go between the three different representations. All right, here we go.
So what I'd like you to do is take your note sheet and rotate it like you see how I have mine in front of you. We're going to begin filling in our power triangle. And we're going to start with putting our finger on our notes on the word percent, and we're going to slide up the arrow to fraction. So we're going to go from percent to a fraction. And what you need to write on your power triangle is what you see in front of you in yellow. How do we go from a percent to a fraction? Well, we put the percent over 100. Put that in your notes right now. Now I'm going to give you an example, and you don't need to write this example down. All you need to do is watch. That is your job right now. Just watch. So if I have 6%, and I want to write that as an equivalent fraction, using my power triangle, I can see that all I do is I take the percent, so that means you take the 6 and you put it over 100. And let's talk about that. Why does it work? Well, remember this percent symbol, we noted it in our vocabulary. It literally means for every 100. And the words for every come with our word per, right? So we have 6 per 100. 6 for every 100. In order for this percent symbol to come off, we need to go divided by 100 because that's what that percent symbol means. Now we could take this equivalent ratio here and we could simplify it. And we know how to simplify fractions. But right now I wanted to show you going from a percent to an equivalent fraction. Again, you don't need to have this down anywhere in your notes. You just need to begin filling out the power triangle.
Next, we're going to look at, if you put your finger on fraction, and I want you to trace down to decimal. So next we're going to go from a fraction to a decimal. So go ahead and rotate your power triangle like you will see mine rotated on the screen. So to go from a fraction to a decimal, what you need to write in your power triangle is numerator divided by denominator. So exactly what you see in front of you. Now we already did this. We have already changed fractions to decimals. We did this back in Unit 2. So if I have the example 3/50ths, or the ratio 3 to 50, and I want to write that as an equivalent decimal, and I didn't have a calculator, or even if I did have a calculator, I still need to be able to type it in correctly, I would go numerator divided by denominator. Since my numerator is smaller than my denominator, so therefore my dividend, which is inside the division box, is smaller than my divisor, which is outside, I know that I'm going to have to bring in my decimal point and annex some zeros. And in our calculator, we would type in 3 divided by 50. So how do we go from a fraction to a decimal? We take the numerator and we divide it by the denominator. So now I again would like you to rotate your notes, how you will see mine rotated on the screen. And then I'm marking in yellow where we're going. If we put our finger on decimal and we slide following the arrowhead over to percent, we're going to take a decimal to an equivalent percent now. And what I'd like you to write in your power triangle is move it, in parentheses, multiply by 100. Remember, a percent literally means for every 100. Now, I'm not starting with a percent in my example here, and I'll give you a minute so that you can fill in your power triangle. Go ahead and fill in move it, multiply by 100. So if I have the example 2/100ths here, and I want to write that as an equivalent percent, I need to multiply by 100. Do you understand why we're multiplying by 100? Because the percent is related to 100. When I multiply by a power of 10, 100 is a power of 10, I'm going to move my decimal point to the right according to the number of zeros. Do you remember when we did that back in Unit 3? So 2/100ths, if I want to take that to a percent, I need to move it, and now my decimal point would be right here. And since I multiplied by 100 there, I was changing that decimal to a percent, I need to make sure that I include my percent symbol with my answer. So the decimal 2/100ths is equivalent to the percent that is 2%. Again, we go from a decimal to a percent by moving it, multiplying by 100. So now, go ahead and leave your note sheet the way it is, and this time we're going to work on the outside of our power triangle. We're going to start with the decimal, so put your finger on decimal, and I want you to trace the arrow up to fraction. So we're going to go from a decimal to a fraction, and we've already done this. We did this back in Unit 2. So in your power triangle, write decimal to fraction. How you read it is how you write it. How would you read this decimal? 25, and what room is this? Hundredths. So that's exactly how I write it as a fraction, 25 hundredths. And you could simplify this fraction as well. That our best answer would be in simplest form, but we're going to keep moving on. So again, how you read it is how you write it. That's how you go from a decimal to a fraction. So now again, go ahead and rotate your note sheet how you see it on the screen in front of you, and put your finger on your note sheet on the word fraction in our power triangle. And we're working on the outside and trace down to percent. We are now going to convert a fraction to an equivalent percent. And how we do that is we're going to change the fraction to a decimal and move it. So write that on your power triangle right now. So I have the example 1/8, or 1:8, and I want to write that as an equivalent percent. So I'm going to change to a decimal, and I change a fraction to a decimal by dividing. So I would go 1 divided by 8, or I could put that in my calculator. And I know I'm going to have to annex some zeros. And I'm going to divide this out. You could take your calculator out and divide this out as well. Let's see, I have 1 to divide into 8 groups. Not enough. bring my decimal up. I'm going to break that 1 into 10 tenths, bring down my 0 tenths. 10 tenths to divide into 8 groups. There's going to be 1 tenth in each group. I've used 8 of them. That means I have 2 tenths left over. Bring my 0 hundredths down. So now I have 20 hundredths to divide into 8 groups. There's going to be 2 hundredths in each group. I've used 16. I have 4 left. Break it into thousandths. There's going to be 5 thousandths in each group. And that would be 40. I subtract. I'd have 0. It got a little scrunched there. So my decimal is 125 thousandths. This would be the thousandths room. Now remember, I want to take this fraction to an equivalent percent. Right now I took this fraction to an equivalent decimal. So now I need to think, I can go back to my power triangle, put your finger on decimal, and trace to percent. How do we go from a decimal to a percent? We move it. We multiply by 100. So I'm going to rewrite this decimal down here just so I have more room. 125 thousandths. And I'm going to move it, multiply by 100 since percents are related to 100. And that would give me 12.5. And now it's not 12 and a half, 12 wholes and half of a whole. It's 12.5%. So for every 100. That would be the equivalent percent to the fraction 1/8. Again, you should have your power triangle filled out. You don't have to have any of my example, which is what you see in front of you here, but you do need your power triangle filled out. So our final conversion, ladies and gentlemen, is still on the outside of the power triangle. Put your finger on percent, and we're going to trace to decimal. So follow the arrowhead that moves towards the word decimal. We're going to take a percent to a decimal. And what you need to write on the outside of your power triangle is back it up. So divide by 100. Go ahead and write that down now. And my example I'm going to show you is I have 75%. I want to change that to an equivalent decimal. So I need to back it up, back it up. Back it is referring to the decimal point. So right now, how this problem is, the decimal point could be right there, and it wouldn't change the meaning of what you see in front of you. If I want to change this percent to a decimal, I need to get this percent symbol out of here, and that means divide by 100. So in order to get this out, I need to divide this by 100. So I'm going to back it up, back it up. Divide by 10, divide by 100. So now my decimal point would be right there, and my percent symbol comes off, so the equivalent decimal would be 75 hundredths. At this point, you should have your power triangle all filled in. And we're going to work with some more examples of converting rational numbers. This power triangle is going to be a really helpful tool, though, to help us do that until we're comfortable with it.